Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Concordia Live, held in partnership with Concordia patron member CARE. It's always such a pleasure to work with CARE to host discussions on gender equity and opportunity-related matters, in large part because of the outsized impact they have around the world in designing sustainable economic mobility and empowerment programs in partnership with a diverse set of private sector leaders, like you'll hear from today. For those of you joining Concordia as guests of either CARE or one of our speakers, welcome. Concordia is a New York-based nonprofit dedicated to promoting public-private partnerships and positive social impact through our Convene, Connect, Create model of member engagement. We're best known for our annual convening, which serves as the preeminent global forum alongside the UN General Assembly each fall. And I'm very pleased to note that this year's event will be hybrid and allow for both in-person and digital attendance. But we also have a robust year-round program, as well as dedicated team members and experts to support our members in their partnership design, growth, and implementation strategies. If you're not yet a member, but active in the Partnering for Positive Social Impact space, I'd encourage you to learn more about our programming, membership, and how to join by reaching out to membership@concordia.net or looking at our website. If you are a member, welcome, and I'm so glad you're here and chiming into this important topic. And I'd encourage you to connect with my team about how to leverage your member benefits towards your partnering goals. I should note, my name is Hannah Delman. I'm the Senior Director of Partnerships here. And so if you are connecting with my team, that would be the avenue to do so. So as mentioned, I'm really pleased that we're able to collaborate with CARE on this important topic. CARE continues to bring insight and innovation to our platform to inform our community on new ways forward to address the age-old challenges related to gender-based inequality. Before I turn over to our moderator, University of Virginia's School of Law Director of the Family Law Center, Ms. Naomi Khan, to introduce the topic in full, I would like to welcome on behalf of Concordia our speakers and provide some spot me guidance. Today, we're joined by Amir Faraki. He's the director of the CARE Corporate Council, and he'll make some opening remarks before turning over to the panel. We have Lisa Manley. She's Vice President of Global Sustainability, Thriving People at Mars. Mike Okoroafor. He's Vice President of Global Sustainability and Packaging Innovation at McCormick. Tori Horton, Senior Management, Product and Social Innovation at PayPal. And Kate Behncken, Vice President, Lead of Microsoft Philanthropies at Microsoft. A few tips and tricks to make the most out of the next 45 minutes. First, listeners are encouraged to use the Q&A feature of the Spot Me to ask questions. Towards the end of the session, at around the 1:30 mark, Naomi will be asking the panelists these questions, so please send them in advance. She may also intersperse them into the conversation as they align with the topics. So the earlier send your questions, the greater the chance you get them answered. For any non-questions, but more so comments, the connect element is central to all we do here, even in the digital era. So I really encourage everyone to use the newsfeed and chat feature on the SpotMe platform. Please introduce yourself, as well as share any relevant work that you're doing related to today's Concordia Live. This will be monitored by a Concordia team member and uploaded as things come. And from time to time, Concordia will be dropping in relevant links made by remarks of our experts, so keep an eye on that. I know some of our speakers have already passed forward things like the SDG5 Playbook from CARE and other materials, so really just make sure that is open and in front of you so you can dive deeper into these topics. You can take the conversation externally, tagging at Concordia Summit, at CARE, or any of our speakers on social media. And finally, that this webinar will be recorded and available on our website post-fact, along with a summary of today's conversation, so you can share that with your networks. With all of that housekeeping business over, Amir, I'm really happy to turn it over to you and to kick this off for the conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Terrific. Thank you, Hannah. On behalf of all of us at CARE, thank you to Concordia for being such a terrific partner and hosting this conversation today. As Hannah mentioned, I'm the director of the Corporate Council of CARE, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's conversation, which we hope will be stimulating and thought-provoking, as well as inspiring the private sector's bold steps toward achieving gender equality. The genesis of this panel and this conversation, at least on the CARE side, started 2 years ago when we launched a Corporate Council at CARE. The private sector is a critical partner in our work to improve basic education, increase access to healthcare, and expand economic opportunity. From longstanding community programs to emergency crisis response, the private sector is an integral part of enhancing our work at CARE, especially through the lens of gender equality, which we apply to all of our work. We realized several years ago that we have these amazing corporate partnerships, some of which are deep and programmatic, some of which are broader, but they operated in a silo in our universe. And so we conceived the Corporate Council really to bring the biggest and most ambitious companies that we partner with together to lead on gender equality at the intersection of the NGO community and the private sector. And so we do that 20 companies strong, and we do that primarily through best practice sharing amongst members, like you're going to have a bit today, but also through thought leadership. Some of that thought leadership manifested itself earlier this year when we released an SDG5 Playbook, which you can find at SDG5Playbook.com, which was really a deep dive at looking how the private sector can accelerate achieving global gender equality, whether it was in the office, in the factory, in the field, in philanthropy, in advocacy. And in that document, in that living website that you can go visit, we had a number of case studies. And the work that member companies and the member companies were doing was actually quite striking, creative, innovative, and we wanted to lift that up today with Concordia. So you'll get to hear some of that today, and we're looking forward to the conversation. Again, thank you for all for taking the time to be with us today and for participating, and Concordia for hosting. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to our moderator, Professor Naomi Khan from the University of Virginia School of Law. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amir and Hannah and Concordia and CARE. I'm Naomi Khan, the Justice Anthony Kennedy and Nancy L. Buck Professor of Law at UVA School of Law. I write in a number of areas, which is why I think I was asked to be the moderator. I write in the areas of gender equity. I also write in the area of international gender issues, and I lived in the Congo for 2 years where I worked on gender equity issues fairly directly. So thank you all for being here. As Amir's already said, this particular panel is inspired by CARE's Corporate Council Playbook on Gender Equity, Sustainable Development Goal 5, which is achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls by 2030. The goal is 2030. The World Economic Forum has said we're at least 100 years away from achieving gender equality, but the panel today will, I hope, give us all kinds of strategies for thinking through how we can push forward that agenda, maybe not achieve gender equality by 2030, but as soon thereafter as possible. That playbook is intended to assist companies and their employees understand what actions they can take to help achieve gender equality. And today we're looking forward to a robust and thought-provoking discussion with concrete actions with some of America's greatest companies on how companies are moving forward and how the private sector is, as Amir said, is moving forward to achieve gender equality. The panelists all bring expertise and influence, and their expertise and influence touch on a variety of areas, and I'm really excited about what I'll be learning and what we'll all be learning today. So the panelists have already been introduced, but the 4 fantastic panelists range from tech to agriculture. So please join me in welcoming Kate Behncken, who's Vice President and lead of Microsoft Philanthropies, which is focused on innovative solutions and partnerships to help realize the promise and potential of technology for everyone. They work with nonprofits, with foundations, with government, and of course with the private sector to help serve underdeserved communities. Tori Horton is the Senior Manager of Product and Social Innovation at PayPal. She is a customer advocate who is skilled in using stories and data to influence collaborative product. Lisa Manley is the Vice President of Global Sustainability, Thriving People at Mars. Lisa leads the Global Thriving People portfolio of initiatives at Mars, which includes respecting human rights, increasing incomes for smallholder farmers, and unlocking opportunities for women, obviously quite relevant to the panel. And then Mike Okoroafor, the Vice President of Global Sustainability and Packaging Innovation at McCormick. Mike is responsible for the strategic direction, policies development, and execution of agricultural ingredient, product, and packaging sustainability, as well as packaging innovation capabilities globally. So a wonderful panel that covers all kinds of different issues. So I have a series of questions, and what I'm going to do is start by asking questions specifically of one of you, But after that, I hope that everybody else on the panel will join in to respond to those questions before I move on to the next one. So it'll be, yes, it'll be questions, but I'm also very much hoping that this will be a discussion. So let me start with equal pay and with Lisa. So in 2020, Mars launched Full Potential, its platform to amplify work on gender equality across its workplaces, sourcing communities, and marketplaces where goods and services are advertised and sold. The platform fits within, well, if you could tell me more about just how the platform fits and what the platform is doing, that's my first question.
Yeah, so let's see. So first of all, the Full Potential platform is a value chain approach to gender equality or gender equity. So it looks at what we can do within our direct workplaces and what we can do in our supply chain communities, and then also what we can do through our marketplace, our marketing, to empower women. And I'm glad, Naomi, that we're starting on the topic of equal pay. Because, I mean, one thing we all know is that the gender wage gap continues to be very, very real. I think the latest data that I've seen is that women earn about 82 cents on every dollar that men earn. And I saw some interesting statistics over the weekend, I think from the Kauffman Foundation, that show that the wage gap is even deeper for working moms. And in our workplaces at Mars, we're taking action with policies and practices that are aimed at improving female representation and improving wages and benefits too. That's a big part of the Full Potential program that you mentioned. And we've done a comprehensive review of our pay practices, and we've found that we pay our associates, our employees, equitably, regardless of their gender. And that's the good news. So we've got equitable pay for women and for men in similar jobs across similar geographies. Now, where we've got more work to do, and what is sort of the next area of our focus within Full Potential, is women in leadership roles. So today, about 40% of our senior leaders at Mars are women. That's good, but definitely not great. So another part of Full Potential from a workplace perspective is an ambition to have 100% gender balanced leadership teams. And we know we've got more work to do on that front.
I'm glad you brought up those statistics. There's Lean In and McKinsey issue an annual report on progress of women in leadership roles, and women start out just under half of entry-level positions. And by the time you get up into the C-suite, it's under 20%. So yeah, there is, it's not the pipeline, it's not the starting, it's getting women into leadership. Tori, while equal pay is front and center for many companies, PayPal has also taken additional steps to achieve gender equality. Can you share some of PayPal's work here?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Naomi. You know, one of the things that we recognize at PayPal is that our mission is for financial health, but that's really linked to pay equality. So when we think about what our commitments are, it includes gender equality is one of the most powerful things that we can do to signal our commitment to financial health. We know that we have to live our values in the office. And Lisa, I'm so inspired by what you're doing at Mars. It's similar to what we're doing at PayPal as we are on this journey to build strong and diverse workplace communities. It means that gender equality is a social issue, and it has to be addressed at every level within the fabric of our work days, within the fabric of our homes, our communities, and our society. One of the things that it asks is for all of us to find those connections between our policies and our day-to-day practices. So we see that the public sector measures and thinks about policies that ensure equal pay and protections for women, and it's really important. Just as important is that the private sector shows up to support these initiatives. In 2019, our Executive Vice President, Louise Pentland, shared that we were going to make a commitment to equitable pay, and that these are the kind of commitments that you don't just make once and set it and forget it. These are the commitments that you need to build into your processes so that you commit to them and make them over and over again, year in and year out. And I'm thrilled to say that 5 years later, PayPal has maintained 100% pay equity among our peers in our salaries and our bonuses globally, and that we're seeing that pay equity for ethnic pay as well in the US. One of the statistics that this audience may already know, but has been really striking during this past year with the pandemic, is that work has increased for women by 30 to 40%. We've seen that between office and home responsibilities, women are doing twice the work at less pay. As a result, one of the things that we did this year at PayPal was to institute a crisis leave benefit. It provided some additional paid time off for our employees who needed to navigate some of the various circumstances that we couldn't see into, but they needed time to care for family members with COVID. Sometimes they needed emergency childcare, or they just needed more flexible work. So we extended some of our backup childcare at no cost, and we saw program usage go up. One of the things that struck us as we've looked back on the year is that 2/3 of those who used these care benefits were women, and a lot of them said they needed the additional time and support. In summary, pay equity and employee care benefits really go hand in hand as we think about how we strengthen the inclusiveness of our workplace culture.
Thank you. It's important to have, concrete suggestions. So pay equity, benefits, backup childcare, very, very, very important. I want to turn now to philanthropy and social innovation and turn to Kate. Microsoft has launched a global skills initiative, which is committed to helping 25 million people acquire new digital skills needed for the COVID-19 economy. Can you talk a bit about how the philanthropy in which you're involved promotes the empowerment of women through technology?
Sure, thanks Naomi. I think just stepping back, when you look at the mission of Microsoft, it's to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. And in Microsoft Philanthropies, we try to bring that to life by empowering non-profits and communities to realize the potential of technology. And it perhaps goes without saying that if we don't ensure that women are fully empowered through technology, then we will never be able to truly empower every person on the planet to achieve more. And it's so important for Microsoft and others in the private sector to think about what's the unique value that you can bring to the table to support this goal. And for us in Microsoft Philanthropies, that's digital inclusion, it's technology, it's partnerships, and voice. And so with digital inclusion, a lot of our work is actually anchored on digital equity. And so the idea that every person in every community should have access to the digital skills that are so important to obtain in-demand roles in an ever increasing digital economy. I think everybody on this call is aware of, there's almost no industry that hasn't been impacted by technology. And so how can we help everyone get access to those digital skills so that they can obtain in-demand roles and improve livelihoods? And the Global Skills Initiative that you just mentioned was definitely part of that effort. Our goal was to reach 25 million people, and we're really pleased that right now we're around 36 million people have been able to access digital skills via that initiative. And when we think about the digital economy, we know that around the world, women and girls are often the groups that are most excluded. And we also know that technology and the ability to use technology, to create technology, is such a powerful thing for everyone. It's an incredibly powerful way for women and girls to move forward, to leapfrog. And so that's why we ensure that our digital inclusion program includes a gender equity lens. And we do that firstly by asking our grantees that they serve at least 50% women in their programs. And so in some ways, I would say that empowering women is table stakes for all of our programs. And additionally, we look to invest strategically in nonprofits around the world. We work with so many just fantastic organizations that are specifically promoting skills for employability for women in tech and tech-enabled roles. So, for example, in India, we partner with Cyber Shiksha that's focused on training women in cybersecurity roles. In South Korea, we support junior achievement, who are running a program specifically for mothers who are returning to the workplace. And then if we think about using technology, through digital transformation, we seek to work with organisations to help them leverage technology to advance their own mission. And so, for example, we work with CARE and we partner to support the Women Respond program to better understand the economic impact and needs of women who are affected by COVID across a number of countries, and thinking about how can we use technology to create data architecture to improve data consolidation to help organisations make more informed decisions. And then finally, just on voice, we're so excited to see that the role of technology and innovation has been elevated in the Generation Equality Forum. And so for the first time, we're seeing technology called out as a force for change to address gender equality.
Technology as a force for change to address gender inequality. Is that what you just, am I just repeating what you just said? Yeah. To promote gender equality.
Equality.
Yeah, but right, to address gender inequality, to promote gender equality.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Hopefully we can hear more about that. I now want to turn to Mike, though, to ask about supply chains. McCormick and Company is obviously a global leader in flavor, and it launched its purpose-led performance sustainability strategy in 2017 with a commitment to improving the lives of people, communities, and the planet. But more specifically, it aims to increase the resilience of farmers, including women, across the global supply chains. How have you done this? And can you share a bit about the dashboard that CARE helped you create to see the risks that women face?
Absolutely, Naomi. Let me start with really explaining our purpose-led performance, which you alluded to here. We created that at the behest of our chairman, Lawrence, 4 years ago, actually, a little over 4 years ago. And to your point, it is really intended to embed what I call a purpose into the business. At that point, we felt like, CSR wasn't going to cut it. So the whole strategy is to have it as part of the business. Let me just explain. When it comes to, philanthropy and things like that, great. But the problem with most companies, especially in our field, is that you give when the business is doing well, and when business is not doing well, you don't give as much. So we changed that. We embedded it. And the way we looked at it, we made a commitment that we would deliver top-tier financial performance while doing well for our people, our communities where we live, where we work, and where we source, and the planet that we share. So what have I just said? We said it's about doing well by doing good. And so that strategy had three pillars to it: people, communities, and planet. Let me start on the communities piece, because that's where we really work with CARE to hone in things. What we're talking about here is the farm communities. Think about it. If you look at our products, we source from mostly challenged regions, most of them around the tropics, whether it be vanilla from Madagascar or India with red pepper, or Vietnam with our black pepper. Some of the places we source are challenged because of climatic conditions and changes. And so one of the things we said is that we're going to build resilience in those communities, meaning we're going to provide capacity and capability building for those farm communities. That's one. Two is we said we're going to drive this idea of gender equality, women empowerment. It is critical because when you look at those farm communities, let me just give you a little bit of statistics. Most of those communities, almost 90% of the workers on the farms, like I grew up, and we'll get to that, are women. But most of the people that own it are men. So we decided to change that because we see it as a predatory activity that we have to eliminate. And that's where we got into. And the third piece of that is ethical supply chain. So it is not sufficient to have, farm level sustainable sourcing. It is critical that the human aspect, especially women empowerment in the supply chain, is really driven hard. So what we did is we partnered with CARE, and then went out to those farm communities, multiple ones around the globe, and understood what women were going through. And when they came back, reminded me of how I grew up, they found out that some of these women start their work as early as 4 a.m. And some of them don't go to bed until maybe midnight because they do all this work in the farm. They come home, they have to do all the chores, they do all of that. And at the end of the day, they own nothing. So what did we set out to do? We set out to create cooperatives, farm community cooperatives that will have women ownership in them. And to do that, we eliminated predatory activities, because if you look at the farm community similar to the one I grew up, after you cultivate and get your crop, you sell it to a middleman. That middleman sells to another middleman. And by the time he gets to us to buy it, they've taken all the profit and the farmer is impoverished and they can't do anything about it. So we decided we're going to do something about it. Remember, these are individual mom and pop farmers. They are not corporations. So by eliminating those middlemen and having them sell directly to us, they get to keep all the profit, which is important because it doesn't necessarily mean our prices are going to go up. It means that the farmers get more. That's one. Two, one of the things that CARE found out for us is that women everywhere share something in common. They want to see their kids educated. So if you have schools that are miles and miles away, it really hurts the women that are trying to make a living. So what did we do? For instance, in Madagascar, we helped put schools, renovate schools within the farm communities, within a stone throw from those areas where they are farming. Guess what? Productivity for those women went up and peace of mind, plus their kids are in school. That's one thing. The other thing we did was, access to capital was critical. So we teamed up with NCBA Clues as part of this work. And then we were able to provide capital to these women so they can start their own businesses, their own farms. Fast forward, if you look at last year, even in the pandemic, these women were thriving. They have happy households, and USAID have noticed the work we did with CARE. And they came in and they are really supporting some of our work, in some cases matching some of our effort. So what have I just said? Our latitude to really impact increased significantly. So that is what I mean by doing well, by doing good. And this is really in the farm communities. But you talk about our supply chain. One thing I want to mention is, as part of that purpose-led performance, we made a commitment that by 2025, we will have 50% of our executive leadership will be women. It is good for business. By the way, the demographic shows that. So, and we're hitting it. And 2025 is pretty close. So you can check us out on that one. We are around 40% now and heading towards 50% in executive leadership. So that is important because we take it seriously to do our part to make sure you have an equitable world, equitable community, especially equitable farm communities. So I'll pause there.
Thank you. Let me ask one more supply chain question, which is to Lisa. Mars also has a global supply chain through which it sources agricultural raw materials like cocoa, coconut, vanilla, and shea. The least resilient link in the supply chain is the first one. Mike's already talked a bit about it, where raw materials are grown and harvested. During COVID, during the pandemic, pre-existing vulnerabilities in sourcing communities have been compounded by all kinds of restrictions, and women around the world face structural barriers that prevent them from thriving, especially in agriculture where these raw materials are grown. Mike's already talked a bit about what McCormick is doing. What has Mars done to empower women in its supply chain at that first link in the field?
Yeah, so thanks again, Naomi, for this question. One thing we know for sure is that supply chains are more resilient when more women can reach their full potential. And just like what Mike said, we know that in agricultural communities all around the world, women continue to face all kinds of barriers to equal opportunity. We've got barriers in terms of access to education, access to finance, and of course, barriers related to the unbalanced expectations for unpaid childcare. So what we believe at Mars is that our sourcing strategies need to be gender sensitive. This means that we've got to improve women's access to agricultural inputs. We've got to improve women's access to capital. And we've also got to improve women's access to output markets as well. And you'll hear a little theme here, I think, from all of us. We're all doing a little bit of bragging on our relationship with CARE, and I'm going to do a little bit of bragging on one of our elements of partnership with CARE. And that is, we're working together in Cote d'Ivoire and in Ghana to empower 50,000 people, most of whom are women, in cocoa sourcing communities through a program that's called Village Savings and Loan Associations. These VSLAs help to close the gap to living income by helping households accumulate more savings, by providing loans and providing access to finance as well. So a really powerful program that is delivering for women back at the origin for Mars, and importantly for the communities that we depend upon. I'll also mention that we've had some really powerful, I think, work with CARE over the last year in gender-sensitive COVID-19 emergency response. So we've worked with CARE in a number of host countries, origins that we rely upon, like cocoa, mint, and fish, on gender-sensitive approaches to deal with the COVID-19 emergency and to try to build a bit more resiliency into those sourcing communities, and can certainly talk more about that in the Q&A if folks are interested.
Actually, that leads directly, I mean, the first question that we've received is COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact on women and girls. Has the pandemic changed how you think about gender equality efforts, either in your business or in your philanthropy? We've started to hear about that from Lisa, but let me turn to ask Kate, Tori, and Mike what your thoughts are on COVID, this first question of COVID-19 having had this disproportionate impact on women and girls, and how this may have changed how you think about your gender equality efforts.
Maybe I should go first, if you don't mind, because that's an area where we feel like our PLP, our strategy of doing things with purpose, has really enabled us to really drive impact. Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about, impact in those communities. So one of the things that we did, this is with CARE again. Lisa, you're right. I got to brag a little bit again with CARE. They actually worked with us in our red pepper communities. So you know, the bulk of the red pepper that MCComics supplies, king of flavor, comes from India. And most of the regions were affected by this COVID, as you would imagine. And those communities like in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana were severely impacted by this. Guess what we did? One of the first things we did is really to reach out to about 7,000 marginalized households, most of them women, with the help of CARE. What is interesting that I like to highlight is that CARE had people that lived in those communities. So that made it easier to remit things, money, and have resources available so that we could provide things to those communities. And in essence, part of the strategy that CARE helped us create really allowed us to really reach and impact those women. We provided PPE, we provided kits, and more importantly, this is serendipitous. The year before COVID hit, 2019, we had installed water purification infrastructure in some of these farm communities that had no clean water. So basically, we installed those facilities, and fast forward, COVID hits. Now you have clean water for people to not just drink, but also to be able to clean things and all the hygiene that is related to that. So that, in essence, is why I say working with CARE really allowed us to amplify the impact we were having in those communities. And that is just a little bit of what we were doing. Now, the last thing I would say is the VSLA that Lisa alluded to. Very, very important. What we did in our own case is that we paid for the interest. MCComics and company pay for the interest on those loans so that they can take it and pay back when they sell their crops. I can tell you, those farm communities are not asking for handout, they're asking for a little help. And if you look at me today, I wouldn't be here without my mom, who was a subsistence farmer. I grew up in a farming community, and those predatory activities that were then, that my mom overcame to get me to where I am, youngest of 4, is what we're trying to implement today at MCComics to ensure that every child grows up, every woman is delighted to see their kids progress and get to the point where they can realize their lifelong ambition. So that's really what the savings and loan can do for you, when you can have women now own their own farms without relying on somebody else.
Thank you. And I see Kate, do you want to go next?
Sure. And we all know that COVID has exacerbated communities that were already underserved. We know that the economic crisis due to COVID has disproportionately impacted women, from roles in retail service sectors to women who left the workplace to care for children, to girls who are unable to continue their education given the impact of COVID. And so as we emerge from COVID, and that's going to be on a different timeline for different countries around the world, we need to do more to focus and double down on our efforts to level the playing field for girls and women. And one powerful way that women can be empowered financially is to secure jobs and livelihood opportunities. And so that's one of the reasons why we focused on the Global Skills Initiative that I talked about earlier. We also see financial empowerment as a great place for partnerships with organizations that are focused on this as well. So, for example, we partner with organizations like MasterCard and Bank of America, who can help build financial literacy, digital financial tools, so that once a woman job seeker lands a job, she can also safely and effectively and inclusively manage her income and support her livelihood. So they're just a couple of the ways that what we're focused on. And I think in terms of doubling down, we are also looking at how can we do more around micro entrepreneurship, which is a critical way to help support women and girls and their livelihoods.
Yes, that certainly is critical. Tori, do you want to? The question was about how the pandemic has changed how you think about these issues.
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts, and Kate and Micah, I would absolutely just tag on to the comments that you've already shared, both about the importance of focusing on putting the woman at the heart of the conversation and solving with her as we think about what are her needs, and then absolutely connecting her to her supply chains and connecting her to the technology that's going to put that dollar in her hands. And that's the thing that we know is so critical, is figuring out how do we put the woman at the heart of that conversation? How do we empower her with the technology and the tools so that she has access and control over her finances? I think the only thing that I would add is that the pandemic has added 36 years to that original pay and opportunity to close the gap for women. So where it had been 100 years, it's now 136 years that we estimate we're going to need to close the gap. It's just far too long. And so I think if anything, the pandemic has really brought to the forefront, we're in a moment of women's crisis. There's never been a better time to act. The time is always, but I think it actually moves right into the next set of conversations about what can we do now and what are we doing today to put the focus on women and change some of the ways that we all show up to put a woman at the heart of those policy and the practice conversations.
This is, I think we've touched on, if you go to the SDG5 Playbook that CARE has put out, there are a series of different places in which companies can make a difference. And I think we've touched on all of them: in the field, in the factory, in the office, in the supply chain, in the community. And we've even touched just a bit on advocacy in terms of what can be done with respect to advocacy on behalf of gender equity issues. We don't have that much longer. And so what I want to do is turn it over to each of you, and I guess we'll go alphabetically for maybe sort of 1 minute of thoughts on kind of final words of encouragement, as well as best practices that you would encourage companies in the private sector to undertake, both best practices that your company might have done, but also best practices that, as you've been in this space, as you've been thinking about all of these issues, best practices that you think other companies might undertake. So final words of encouragement and best practices, and we'll go alphabetically by last name. Kate.
I will just say one very short thing, and I think if COVID has taught us one thing, and I hesitate to say if there was a silver lining of COVID, but if it's taught us one thing, it's that we all have an opportunity to rethink business as usual, and especially around partnerships. And we have just seen an incredible appetite for organizations, whether it's across government or the civic sector, private sector, nonprofits, to partner in new ways. And this, a truly inclusive economic recovery, is a problem that is way too big for one company or one industry. And so, you know, we are looking for new and innovative ways to partner with customers, the partner ecosystem, and especially governments to scale this work. And so that is one of the things that we are very, very focused on, is how can we partner with governments and have everybody bring their strengths to the table to help scale this work and reach more women and girls.
Thank you. Tori.
It's a wonderful lead-in, Kate, to the thing that I think is the most important next step, which is right now the UN is hosting the Generation Equality Forum. This June, we're having 26 years took the call out of the Beijing Women's World Conference to have a Generation Equality Forum. They've invited governments, they've invited nonprofits, they've invited private sector, philanthropy. They've also invited the girls' youth groups. They've invited grassroots women's organizations and individuals. Everyone can show up. Everyone's going to show up with their resources, with their ideas for a blueprint, with an action that they can do and a commitment for the next 5 years. And what's cool is that, you know, PayPal, we're really excited about what this means to put women at the center of the way that we talk internally about women's rights and opportunities to close the gender gap, the way that we talk with our consumers, the way that we talk with our value chain. But equally, and Kate, this is exactly, it's given us opportunities to connect with Microsoft. It's given us opportunities to connect with CARE. It's given us opportunities to connect and collaborate across the private sector for how can we all show up as an ecosystem that thinks about what happens when we put the women at the heart of some of our policies, and what happens when we collectively make actions about what we can do to close the gap. So my teaser is coming in June, PayPal is going to make some really big and game-changing commitments, but we hope that everyone listening, this entire network, joins us in that moment. This is a call to action for women. What we'd love is to see a spark for global and local conversations. We want to see a drive for increased public and private commitments and investments together. And most of all, we're hoping to deliver some concrete game-changing results for girls and women.
Thank you. Lisa.
Yeah, so I will echo the enthusiasm for action and for collaboration. I think that there has never been a time that is more ripe for meaningful action across value chains and for meaningful collaboration between companies and with companies and governments as well. I think maybe the thing I would add is, you know, this is a time where I think we've all got an opportunity to be brave. You know, we are trying to change a power structure that has been deeply ingrained, and that is not a challenge for the faint of heart. So there are going to be a lot of folks who see this as a zero-sum game, who think that for women to rise, men are going to have to fall back. And I don't think that's true. We know that when women are more economically secure, families, communities, businesses, and entire nations are also better off. So, you know, I'm hopeful that we are heading into a new era of bravery on this topic.
Thank you. Last words, Mike?
Wow, this is really impressive. I want to echo one thing we used to say when I was growing up. If you empower a woman, you empower a household, you drive a community, and more importantly, you expand access in any nation. And so if you look at what we're talking about here, and I agree with you, Kate, this is a pre-competitive space. We got to work together. And that is what you see. If there's one theme that is coming out of this, is that this is a pre-competitive area where we all have to band together. The important thing about this is a time to start embracing NGOs like CARE even more, because I believe, and we believe, that they are the moral compass of this journey. And if we continue with working with them, their expertise and their insights will really allow us to achieve our goals sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great words to end on. When you empower a woman, you empower a household, you empower a community, you empower a country, you empower the world. On behalf of Concordia and CARE, I want to thank all of the amazing panelists for all of your insights. Thank you.